Professor Peter Stevens, it's a pleasure to have you with us here on Campus 103.7, the University of Malta's radio station, and also it's a national station here in Malta, the equivalent of BBC Radio 3 or 4, Malta's culture station. And it's a great honor to have you with us. Thank you for joining.
Well, it's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
And the main reason we decided to do this interview, and you accepted, is that there's a connection to Malta in the sense that you have donated one of your signed sketches of one of your greatest creations, shall we say, to the auction that's going to be held on the 30th of September, which will raise funds for the restoration of St. Paul's Anglican Pro-Cathedral in Valletta. So thank you very much for that donation, and I'm sure there will be many bids for it.
Well, I would like to think so, because, I mean, that's not by any means my only link to Malta, you know?
Can you tell us more?
Yeah, I mean, my godfather, who's not with us now, but during Second World War, he flew supplies in Blenheims into Malta, into the old airfield.
Yes.
And he told me stories about how dramatic that was and the extraordinary efforts of the Maltese people. You know, who they would, I mean, I tell you just briefly the story. They would set off from Gibraltar, you know, and when they were about 200 miles from Malta,
yes,
they would circle around because there would have been a bombing raid going on.
From Sicily.
As soon as the raid had finished, they absolutely flat out to Malta. And as he said, there were thousands of people with baskets full of stones filling in the holes in the runways.
Indeed. Oh, wow.
You know. So, and then those people with the baskets then would help unload the plane.
Of course.
The quickest they could, and they'd be off and away before the next raid arrived. So, and he told me those tales, which was fantastic.
So this would have been in the worst part of the war when the convoys weren't getting through, and the only trickle of supplies coming through were from submarines and a couple of destroyers making a quick run, and your godfather piloting planes, supply planes coming in and leaving as soon as possible, not to get caught in the air raids.
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, definitely. But, I mean, since then, I've come and I've been a judge in the Valletta concours for a good few years now.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, and I've holidayed on Gozo. And, in fact, I was in Malta just 2 weeks ago talking to a friend of mine about a possible client for a project. So, yeah, there's a lot of links. And that's why it's a delight to be able to do something for this fantastically worthwhile charity auction, I must say.
Indeed. Yep. There's been a program of events and fundraising for the last few years, and we've had a number of Maltese and international, including British personalities who have donated things or given lectures. We had Max Hastings, the historian and author of so many books, give a special lecture about the Operation Pedestal, and funds were raised thanks to that. And this is the final push, though, this auction, with so many things being auctioned, whether it's your print, the signed print, or whether it's activities, days out. Joseph Calleja, our famous opera singer, has offered to sing in someone's living room, which is amazing.
Would be fantastic.
Yes,
just fantastic. No, I love. In fact, I've looked through the list. You know, I mean, I'm kind of honored to be in such a list of wonderful things. You know, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I should, looking on the auction myself on the 30th and see, you know.
Fantastic. But it's great to be speaking to you, Professor Stevens, Peter Stevens. People, you can be defined, or your title would be a British car designer, at least according to Wikipedia and many biographies. But you're so much more than that. I mean, you have worked with so many different companies. You've designed so many interesting things. What would you say are your crowning achievements?
Do you know, it's always a funny thing that, because, I mean, obviously, people know the McLaren F1 because they just know about it, But I also, for example, did some work in India with the company Mahindra, and we worked on which sounds strange to say, equally satisfying, a little rural utility vehicle, which is a little kind of pickup that could be bought by a village and shared by the village. And it could be a pickup, it could be a little bus, it could be a little van, it could even be a small ambulance, some tiny vehicle, But to me, I get almost equal satisfaction.
Of course.
Because when I've been to India and I see these things in a little rural village, and that's really nice because
it's probably very economical and easy to operate. So some of the sort of more distant villages can have transportation finally.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
I mean, it's fine to say with the McLaren. Well, there's 100 people who are very happy with their car. I like to think that in India there are 10,000 who are happy with their little thing.
Indeed.
It's a funny balance that it's equally nice.
But for those perhaps listening who are not aware, the McLaren F1 is a road car built by the company that is also known for Formula One participation. And for many years, it was the fastest road car in the world. Very dramatic, gull wings or scissors wings, that they call them, the ones that go up vertically.
They're a kind of mix of half a gull wing, half a scissor. I mean, they're quite a nice geometry.
Indeed.
Because what I like the idea of, when the doors are open, it also looks cool because it makes a nice kind of shape like wings, really, which is So yeah, the door was very special, and the door, we called it a bit of theatre. Because when you stop,
yes,
it's not just a door that boing, it's open. It's a bit of dramatic theatre, and that's a nice aspect.
And it's obviously a massively collectible car nowadays, worth millions. Famous people such as Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean owns one or possibly two. I believe,
George Harrison had one.
The Pink Floyd drummer Nick Mason, I believe.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and quite a few in America, and very expensive in America. So the people have to be rich and famous to own one now. I mean, that's a funny thing. We never thought of the car like that when we were designing it. I mean, we wanted to do the best possible car that we could. If as a result of it being the best we could do, it also turned out to be the fastest, that was because the prime objective wasn't to make the fastest car,
Okay.
But if you make what you think is the best car, then pretty fair chance it will turn out fast. And the record speed that we did on VW's Aerolation track with a friend of mine driving, and I wasn't there, but he had phoned me up and asked a bit of advice, about setting up the car. And it was a strange feeling. So he then said, "Oh, that'll be all right then." I said, "Yeah, be fine." And he said, "All right, I'll phone you this evening." And I suddenly had this thought, because he's a really good friend of mine. And I've just said to him, sitting in my chair in my studio, what I'm telling you means the car will be fine. And then he'll go out and do, in miles an hour, 246 miles an hour,
Wow.
which is scarily fast.
Indeed.
Admit, And there's a little bit of video of him doing this, And it's the difference between race drivers and us normal human beings, is that he is totally cool when he's driving it, and he has the spare mental capacity both to be reading out the speed as it's gathering speed, but also to say what the oil temperature was, what the water temperature was. And just at the end of it, he said, "Oh, and the fuel warning light has just come on." So I know he's got all that wonderful capacity to do the other things,
Yes.
And I just still love that.
Amazing. Of course, we're not encouraging people to drive too fast on proper roads. We're just celebrating the achievements that
Yeah.
humankind has made in the field of engineering and
Yes.
design, including in this case creating a machine that can go so fast on land, and for many years was the fastest thing that could
Yeah.
be driven around a racetrack safely, of course.
That's it. And I mean, the point about the speed is not that you will ever use that speed if you're a normal customer, but what it means is the systems that allow for that speed safely are there for you all the time, even if you're just going 100 kilometers an hour, to go to the beach or the countryside or something. All those systems that look after you continue to look after you really well at what we would call sensible speed.
Indeed. This might interest our engineering students here at the University of Malta, where Campus 103.7 is based. I'm interviewing Professor Peter Stevens, a famous British car designer who's donating a signed print of his most famous creation, the McLaren F1 car, to be auctioned off for the auction to raise funds for the restoration of St. Paul's Anglican Cathedral in Valletta. As you're a car designer, you went to Central St. Martin's School of Art and the Royal College of Art.
Yep.
But I mean, a car is a machine. So, how does design and engineering, how do they come together how have they come together in your life, and how do they come together in the life of a car designer? You need to know a bit about everything, really, don't you? Or a lot.
You do. It's for sure. And I mean, to an extent, if a car comes out really well as a piece of design, that's because a team, a very small team in McLaren's case with that car, worked together. I mean, there still is a little bit in the industry where the enemy are the guys down the corridor. So if you're a designer, you say, the engineers are ruining my great ideas.
Yes.
If you're an engineer, you say, oh, those wretched stylists, they just want to make something looks all right. Well, unless there's, because, if you're, I don't know, if you're a designer in Germany, if you like, the enemy is in France and Italy and Japan and maybe China eventually, it's not down the corridor. And so I always believed, that being a really close-knit member of a team is the way that those things happen well. And I'm with the McLaren, most of the guys who worked on the project, we're still great friends, and we still meet and laugh. And we remember how fascinating it was. Because I tell you, at the time, it was very hard work, We were all probably working harder than we had done in previous jobs,
Yes.
And we couldn't stand back far enough from the project to sort of see what we'd achieved. I mean, it sounds silly to say, we know it was okay, we know it was fast, but we didn't realize at the time, what a landmark it would be in terms of high performance.
Indeed, and it definitely was. We're talking back in the 90s here.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
And it remained the fastest, officially the fastest car in the world for many years before the Bugatti Veyron came around, I believe.
Yes.
And a number of other pretenders to the throne.
And now, in fact, the same guy who did that speed, the friend of mine, Andy Wallace, in the McLaren F1, he's the one who did 304 miles an hour in the Bugatti.
Oh, wow.
A couple of years ago. And even he says, I don't think I'd want to do that again. Not because it was dangerous and or anything like that. It's just it's different technology. Things like the tires. The tires really don't like going
Of course.
Can you imagine?
But to conclude our conversation about car designers versus engineers, of course, the biggest enemies are always the accountants.
Well, this is true. Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, these days there is a conservatism because what it now costs to do a new car. I mean, if you're talking S-Class Mercedes or something, it's probably 3 billion euros. So, in other words, the investment you're putting at risk by possibly making a mistake, especially in the aesthetic, if you think the direction is to be, and some cars now look so aggressive, you think if you stop, they could eat a dog, the face is kind of, and so there is a risk. And I think it has made the industry a bit risk averse, to be honest.
Oh, interesting. And for the benefit of our listeners, particularly students, who are just starting off perhaps their university career, what would you recommend that they study if somebody wants to become like you, a designer in the car industry, even though probably the industry has changed quite a bit from when you were younger to how it is today? In fact, the future is also hybrid, electric, and all these other technologies. But what would be your advice?
Well, and what you have to remember is every single aspect of everything we see and touch and experience has been designed. Now, some of the horrible things mean they've been badly designed, but they've still been designed, which is, your microphone holder, somebody designed it,
Indeed.
It looks effective and fine, and it doesn't offend, if you like. So everything requires designing of some sort. These days, I think the job of students, a lot of it is to demand from their tutors, if you like, more information, more discussion about design, because the way that design has become, it's become really separated from the engineering. It's been separated from the aerodynamics, and it's important if you're going to be a designer, say, I'd like to know about this. I want to know about that, In fact, I'm just thinking as we're talking, next time in Malta, I should come and talk to the students in the university.
That would be wonderful.
Because I thoroughly enjoy that, because, my task still is to challenge young people to think ahead, think
Indeed.
very broadly, because that's the way we'll get the progress. So that kind of thing would be fun, but it is necessary, really, truly, to be demanding, and say, okay, I'm doing design in a visual sense, but I'd like to learn a bit about aerodynamics, so that somebody doesn't take my project away and say, I fixed it, aerodynamics is perfect, and you get it back and it's horrible. That's the kind of thing we have to avoid. Indeed. For sure.
I can't not ask you about some of the other work you've done, apart from the McLaren F1. We mentioned the project in India with Mahindra, but you've also worked with Jaguar, with Lotus, with Subaru, with MG when they still existed in the UK, rather than the MG that is now owned by the Chinese company. You even worked on the Rover 75, the very last Rover, I believe, made in the UK.
We did the MG version of that, the MG ZT, and we did station wagon ZTT, and we did a V8 version of that, which I had one. That was, we had such a tiny budget at MG Rover,
By the end, yes.
Our design budget was roughly what BMW would spend on doing the steering wheels for the whole car. So we had to be very efficient, and we had to not waste time and money.
Yeah.
Which fascinating that the company was kind of doomed in a way.
What happened to the British car industry? Here in Malta, we used to even have a factory that built, Morris's and various other makes, Hillmans and other British cars, Triumphs in the 60s and 70s. And all you could see in Malta, apart from some Italian cars, because we had a lot of Italian influence, and a few Germans, eventually the Japanese. But for many years, the market here was dominated by British cars. Or American cars that were built in Britain, like the Ford Anglias and Escorts. What happened to the British car industry, the indigenous British car industry? Well, it just failed so miserably.
Sadly, I think we had it too easy, because we had the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth were natural customers for our cars. So we sort of didn't have to make an effort, and I think that because of not making an effort, I mean, the companies in those days were really profitable. They made lots of money. They didn't invest it back
Reinvested
in
into
new products,
and
And
research and
suddenly, we looked up from our desk, and the world,
and
had
overtaken.
changed. And I mean, there was a phrase in England, export and die, because, and in a slightly patronizing way, we thought, well, we're exporting they'll like whatever we give them. And eventually they didn't, And they said, hey, we can get better things eventually, of course, from Japan, but we can get better things from Europe and America. And it was a little bit of laziness, which I think it's a shame. And that's something you can't get back.
Indeed. That's why there are no more Rovers, no more Austins, no more Morrises.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, which is a shame.
And it's a shame. Yeah, when I come to the concourse, I see all these, elderly British cars, which, like a Mark I Ford Escort, you don't see them in England, and if you come and you see beautifully restored or ones that have been beautifully cared for all their lives, and that's terrific.
There is a big movement here in Malta for that sort of thing, a very active classic car community. What about your work with Lotus? Maybe a couple of words about your memories of working with Lotus?
Well, the delightful thing is that on Saturday, just this past Saturday, there was a Lotus old boys meeting, and of course it was full of old boys like me. But Michael Kimberley was there, who was the chairman when I was at Lotus, and I mean we had a very tiny budget to do projects, but that made us, instead of it making us kind of lazy or dispirited, it made us try even harder to, with the limited resources, make something, because I did the XL and the Esprit and the Elan, but also we were a consultancy. And we worked for some of the General Motors companies as well. It was terrific. And it's funny, the atmosphere on Saturday was just as I remember it in the past. We were all having a coffee together, and we were laughing about old times and looking at the stuff we had made and thinking, this still doesn't look too bad. So I mean, Lotus was a delight. It got taken over by General Motors.
Indeed.
And General Motors, although they were supportive, a giant company employing millions around the world, suddenly taking on this little company.
Cottage industry almost, yeah.
Yeah, and systems arrived that were meaningless to us, And so I thought, well, this isn't really going to, go anywhere. That I thought was exciting, because I like the motor racing as well. So yeah, that's when I went to McLaren, where the obviously opportunities and budget wasn't huge, but it was better, definitely. But the other thing is that I've designed trucks as well for a number of companies, and I've recently done a number of funicular railway projects, both for Germany, Switzerland, and particularly Hong Kong Peak Tram. And that's a fascinating technology, because the engineering pieces are huge compared with, the sort of the size of engineering pieces in the automotive,
Of course.
I can't stretch my arms wide enough. If you are doing the pulley that the cable goes over that pulls a cable car, you're doing a pulley which is 5.5 meters in diameter.
Oh, wow. Yes.
It's on a lathe of a size that you can't believe, and it has to be machined to a tolerance of 3 mil. And to see that happening absolutely blows your mind. I love that part of it, because I still like that joining of engineering and visual design.
Possibly, absolutely. Possibly some of our listeners who had worked at the Malta dry docks, the famous Maltese port, who worked with heavy industry, massive cranes, would relate to the kind of thing you're talking about now. But it's amazing how you worked in the different aspects of automotive design and engineering, whether it's for designing tiny little cars, or these massive projects that you're talking about. You even worked in the United States, I see here, and you've done consultancy for BMW, Williams, and Toyota. It's an amazing CV, and it'll be wonderful to have you here in Malta again when you next visit, and maybe even we'll get you here at the university to give a lecture. You were going to say?
It would be cool. It would absolutely, because with BMW, I worked on the Le Mans car, the one that won in 1999 at Le Mans. Which was, and that's a glorious thing because I'm fascinated by Le Mans. The first time I went to Le Mans with a friend of mine, and we took a little Porsche 924 GTR, and we didn't qualify. Because we knew nothing. We didn't know you needed a separate signaling crew at the far end of the circuit. We didn't know you needed to effectively build your own pit. You just got this empty room that smelt of urine, and you had to build your tables and everything in there. So you had to go to the local Leroy Merlin, which was the hardware shop, and when I got back from there, I wrote myself a note to be opened on New Year's Day, and it said, "Don't go back to Le Mans." Instead of which, I went back 19 times.
19 times. Le Mans, of course, the famous 24-hour race in France, legendary. And so you participated in it 19 times?
With teams, working in various roles with the teams,
Amazing.
And we with a private Porsche 956, we came second behind the works supported car that won.
Well done.
And we're just like 4 minutes behind at the end,
That's amazing.
Of course, with the BMW we won, with the McLaren F1, that won as well. It's seductive,
Yes. You've also done work for Subaru for the World Rally cars, the Imprezas. Very popular in Malta among the boy racer community.
Well, they're great, I mean, I still like Subarus. I've got the flat six Legacy Outback, which is the engine was a joint venture with Subaru and Porsche, the flat six, and it's fantastic. I haven't cured myself of that.
So, Professor Peter Stevens, let's conclude. First of all, perhaps your appeal about the auction happening on the 30th of September, that's raising funds for the final push, for the final amount of funds needed to conclude the restoration of St. Paul's Anglican Cathedral. You are donating one of your prints?
Yeah. Yes, I am. I did. In fact, what happened was the materials we used when I drew the sketches for the car, those materials were, if you put a drawing in the sunlight, in about 6 months, because the magic marker ink would disappear and the drawing would disappear. So I made a print of one of my favorite of the sketches done during the project. And this is the artist's proof. So it's 1 of 1. Which is what the print is, and which is why I'm very happy to give that. I know there's loads of car enthusiasts in Malta, but also other people who will be online.
It will be an international auction, exactly.
Yeah. But the other thing is that, I mean, Valletta to me is startling city, extraordinary city, Every time I'm there, I get up terribly early to try and be first in line to see the Caravaggio, because
Indeed.
those paintings are extraordinary. But all of those buildings, I mean, they are wonderful. They're quite extraordinary, and they deserve to be there forever. We can't say whether they would be there forever, but they absolutely deserve the preservation and restoration, what seems to be, I mean, I'm not being patronizing, the craftsmanship applied to those buildings now, it's fantastic. It's like the craftsmanship applied to restoring cars. I mean, the reputation Malta has for all of that kind of thing, and I think caring for its history is, well, it's so fundamental, I mean, there is a little Arabic saying, how can we know where we should be going if we don't know where we've come from? And knowing where you've come from is part of that history of the buildings, So to me, I mean, it's something that is very, very dear to my heart, actually.
Wonderful.
And I'm hoping that lots of your listeners and even beyond, or maybe on it,
We'll
people
take part.
realize, I mean, they will be receiving something nice,
Yes,
but what they will be giving, is something even more long-lasting and important.
indeed.
And to me, it's a kind of exchange, isn't it?
Indeed.
You get something nice, and Malta is preserved.
Indeed. So you'll be getting that. Something nice would be an original sketch, one of the first sketches
Yep.
from Professor Peter Stevens of the McLaren F1, which was a legendary car. And you'll be giving a contribution to help save Valletta's iconic skyline, which of course includes the St. Paul's Anglican Cathedral, which you will be helping to restore. For more information, go to stpaulspromalta.org, stpaulspromalta.org, and then there's a page for the international auction. I mean, it's easy to find even via Google, St. Paul's Anglican Cathedral, Valletta auction, and the pages will come up. And then on the 30th September, the bids will start between 30th September and 15th October. There's a local auctioneer house that will be taking care of the auction, and bids will be welcome from around the world. And the lots have been donated from Malta, the US, Australia, and France, and also including the lot donated by Professor Peter Stevens from the United Kingdom. What a pleasure it's been. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's a delight, absolute delight.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll see you there when I see the students. I'm going to make a point of doing that.
We'll sort something out for you. I'll speak to people right after this interview, and next time you're over, we'll see you here at the university and also at the Valletta concourse. Hopefully, the car show.
No, you definitely will. They are bullying me already for my dates when I'm coming out.
Fantastic.
But I like to come early because I get up early and go into see the Caravaggio again.
Absolutely.
Okay, terrific.
It's so wonderful to speak to someone of your stature and all you've achieved, but also for the fact that you love Malta so much. It's so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye then.